It's 2022, and I finally have the Batman on screen that I've wanted for my entire life. Hey there, and welcome back to the Disconnected. Today I'm going to be reviewing Matt Reeves' The Batman from 2022, starring Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Colin Farrell, John Turturro. This is going to be both a non-spoiler review followed by a spoiler review, so I will be sure to give you the warning when that is coming, but make sure you stay to the break to find out what my score is for this film. So I think that there are 4 reasons that this film is extremely successful. First up is going to be casting. So, just like any other main superhero movie that we're getting announced, as soon as Robert Pattinson was announced as the Batman, he was met with a lot of scrutiny. And then, on top of all that, Zoe Kravitz, Colin Farrell, even Paul Dano, there are all kinds of people that were wondering, were they going to be able to pull off these characters? And just a few minutes into this movie, it was quite clear this was a nearly perfectly cast film. Not only did all of the characters on screen work very well for what they were playing, beyond that, the relationships that they were able to create and the chemistry that they had, it seemed very authentic, and that made everything just that much more successful. The second thing that made this a very successful film was Gotham City itself. It felt very lived in. Obviously, you've heard the terms dark thrown around a lot this weekend about this film, but yes, it is a very dark place, and it was filmed in a way that made it feel like a real tangible city with a history that felt lived in, that felt like something that you've seen before, that you've been witness to. And that made it just able to be related to in a way that many Gotham cities did not come across that way, such as in the Nolan trilogy. I think that this was a vastly more successful Gotham City than in the Nolan trilogy. The next reason I feel that this was so successful is because of the influences on the film. This is what I think is probably the most faithful comic book adaptation for a Batman that we've ever seen. There are lots of issues and stories that you could look back on and say, this is the exact one that really inspired this, but in all reality, it spans across all kinds of storylines that have come across through DC, and it works immaculately. It is done so perfectly in a way that really makes you feel like you were reading something that you've seen on the page before. Whereas something like Nolan's trilogy and even a lot of the Tim Burton things, they felt more goofy or out of place. When this one, it felt a lot more grounded. And what's funny is people said that about the Nolan trilogy after the Burton movies, but this one just takes it to a whole new level. It works in a sense that Nolan could not even pull off through any of his 3 films. And the fourth thing that made this work is simply the Batman. Batman in this film is the perfect balance of not that teenager entry-level like Spider-Man type of bumbling character, and it's not this super advanced, knows everything already, really just automatically has all of the powers that the Batman would have, just like Christian Bale did in Batman Begins. Pattinson really is that perfect in-between. He is somebody that is eager to show what he can do, but still very much learning, and it works through the entire film. Now, before I get to the spoiler side of things, I did want to touch on a couple more things. One, the score is magnificent. It is legitimately one of the best parts of this entire film. It is something that felt just raw and real and heavy throughout the entire film. What really made it stick is I went right from the theater to my car and started playing the score, but as I left, there was a storm coming in from the east and clouds that I could see with lightning dancing across the sky, and it was the perfect tone to come out of the theater. The other thing to touch on is the villains. First off, Colin Farrell disappears into his makeup. He is magnificent in this film. He is hilarious also, which is not something I really expected. But easily some of the funniest parts in this film are all Colin Farrell. Paul Dano also very, very horror-centric in the beginning part of the film. But by the nearing the third act, when he really starts to come into his own, he fits that role just wonderfully. But he really needs to step out of his shell before he really encompasses that. But the star of this film, as far as villains go, John Turturro playing Falcone, is hands down just top-notch, A-plus, best of his game that I've seen him in years being able to fill a role. Falcone feels grimy to look at. He feels like somebody that is just the essence of corruption in a city like Gotham, and man, does he make it work. Okay, so all that being said, I gotta be honest, this is a 5-star film for me. One, I was entertained the entirety of the film. There was not a moment that I was wishing it was over. Even though it was long, I was okay watching it the entire time. So glad I didn't have a ton to drink before, so I didn't have to get up in the middle. 2, I think it was perfectly cast. I think everybody filled their roles in the exact way that they needed to. 3, Gotham City felt more real and tangible than ever before. 4, the influences that they had were just astonishing and beautiful and so right up my alley that I could have 10 more sequels of this and be there opening day on every single one. And then finally, the Batman. Robert Pattinson absolutely killed it. I think he's the best on-screen adaptation that we've had of the Batman ever. And I sincerely hope that they greenlight at least one more sequel, if not 47 more. Obviously, that's a joke. Please don't overdo it. But I could see 10 more films like this right into my veins, and I would be stoked on it because it is the exact type of Batman film I want. Bring on Detective Batman. Bring on the Batman that is hunting down the Zodiac Killer, you know, searching for clues at crime scenes and actually figuring things out. Okay, this is your official warning. After this brief intermission, we are coming back to a spoiler-filled, more in-depth review of the Batman. Okay, fair warning again, this is going to be full of spoilers. So back to the 4 things that I use this as a success. Number 1 was the casting. The casting in this was great, but beyond that, people like Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson had been friends in real life, so their relationship on screen had that chemistry that you could see advance in a way that was just perfectly played out and felt very realistic. The only gripe I have with their relationship is that they kissed twice in this film. The very first kiss was genuinely like romantic and authentic and raw, but that should have been the final kiss. The final kiss as the characters were departing, it was just like this quick peck and didn't feel right. The first kiss didn't feel earned, but this, if it was in the place of the second kiss, it would have been absolutely perfect. Odd thing to point out, but genuinely works out. Falcone and the Penguin, they are the perfect 1-2 punch of a mob boss in a comic book film. Colin Farrell was ridiculously great as the henchman, and Falcone just perfect in this. And John Turturro, again, played him magnificently, but in all reality, when they were together, it was just something special. That relationship was beautiful. And then, even more, there was other relationships in this that felt so real. One thing I did want to point out is that we really missed a relationship of Batman or Bruce Wayne and Alfred in this film, played by Andy Serkis, but in all reality, it felt like the Alfred character was sort of replaced by the Commissioner Gordon character, played by Jeffrey Wright. And if anything, that being more developed was perfect, because one reason that I felt like I love this film more than anything, let's get to part 2, Gotham City itself. It was, you know, like I said, it very much looked like Sin City, but the other aspects of it that made it successful is how much I could visualize everything. They started talking about the orphanage, and before they got there, I was picturing what it could look like because of what we'd already seen as part of the city. And then the way that the bat signal lights up the sky is so realistic that it's not, you know, like something necessarily out of Batman the Animated Series, but that's all I kept picturing because this is such a black and dark blue hued film that I just wanted to go back to the 90s and relive Batman the Animated Series for the first time. I love that this was influenced heavily by a detective story. Now, first of all, the Riddler in the entire first act comes across as the Zodiac Killer. That's like exactly what he was doing. The influences that I was not expecting to see. We have traps that look like they were straight out of Saw in the first act. We have, dark streets and this crime-filled city that feels like something that you would see in these real mob boss films like Goodfellas and something like that, but obviously heightened in a way that makes it feel a little more comic booky. But that gets me to the next one, is this felt like Sin City. The entire city, the entire time I'm walking through, the neon lights coming through the fog, the darkness juxtaposing with the bright city lights, it felt like Sin City, and I loved it. The first Sin City film is one that when I saw it in theaters, I was blown away. And to have that sort of tinge this new film was perfect for me. And then finally, like I said, the Batman. So Robert Pattinson is great as the Batman. In my opinion, he is a lesser Bruce Wayne than Batman. However, the acting that he did just with his eyes as Bruce Wayne was over the top. I think that he is the best acted Batman and Bruce Wayne that we've ever seen on film. That being said, there are nuances that I think would work better from other past iterations. I think this version of the Batman is the best Batman we've ever had. I think that the Christian Bale version of Bruce Wayne was probably the better Bruce Wayne, but you know, take it or leave it. I liked so many different things about this Bruce Wayne that I'd rather have this version. I mean, the fact that they showed the black makeup on his eyes after he took the mask off, that's never been touched on before. That helped so much bring it into this real, you know, just gross, realistic way that I've never seen before. Like I said on the non-spoiler part, the fact that he was sort of a bumbling Batman helped quite a bit. You know, the fact that we saw him scared of heights, and then he took that jump and had the parachute, and as he's going, he tries to go onto the bridge, onto the truck, and hits the bridge and falls, and be like, you know, hopefully nobody saw that, and walked away. We would have not seen that with other iterations of Batman, and it was great to see him still learning the ropes. And all of this that he's gone through in this one is really going to show in the next sequel, if we do get one, what he has learned from. The fact that at the end, he was finally realizing that he was only doing this as vengeance and needed to change things. This felt like, to me, the most hopeful iteration of Batman we have ever seen. So many people are calling this depressed and emo Batman, and I do not get that at all. Again, I think this is the most hopeful Batman we have ever seen on screen, ever. And that includes Adam West. Okay, handful of scenes I wanted to point out here. Number one, the opening 15 minutes of this film are a masterpiece. I think that the criminals being afraid of the darkness just because Batman may be there, I think it was a way to show how a city could be, you know, intimidated by a vigilante without even showing him. And it was really great to see the criminals reacting to things and genuinely afraid. But then the rest of the film, Batman pretty much only ever came out of the dark and the shadows, and I loved seeing it like that. Second thing I wanted to point out, the Batmobile and the entire chase scene. So first of all, the introduction to the Batmobile, amazing. The rumble that I got in my seat when it first made that sound and just revved up for like 30 seconds was one of the most intense sound design things that I've ever experienced in my life. It was wonderful to be able to sit there and just rumble with it, and it genuinely made it terrifying. So good. Followed by, obviously, that chase scene on the freeway. Beautifully directed, beautifully choreographed. Colin Farrell and Robert Pattinson acting their asses off, mostly with their eyes and their mouth through this scene, and it was so good. Satisfying, obviously, to see, you know, the Penguin think that he's getting away, and then the burst through the flames at the end. Just astonishing to see it put on screen like that. So well done, and I can't help but imagine how many people died in that. But that's the Penguin for you. He caused so much distress in those just couple minutes that it was wild to see. The next thing, to see the Riddler's final video opening with him, you know, thanking his followers for commenting. Basically, he did everything except say like and subscribe, and it's kind of awkward for me to be pointing that out as I'm recording this for YouTube, but just great to see the humanity aspect of it. Is that it's a guy on the fringe that we have seen plenty of these fringe people in the last decade, and pulls it off in such a way that makes him that more maniacal, which is crazy to envision. And Paul Dano really fits it. Like I said in the non-spoiler part, he didn't really come into every aspect of that character for me until he started losing it at the end. Like, until he was being questioned by the Batman in the jail cell, until he was being questioned by Batman in Arkham, he didn't really feel like this tangible person that was just losing it. And then, oh my gosh, that interrogation scene at Arkham, it was so well done because Matt Reeves was like telegraphing to the audience that the Riddler knows who is the Batman, but by his word you could tell he didn't know who the Batman was, because he was telling Batman, Bruce Wayne, he was the only one we let get away. The entire time, he thought he was working in tandem with the Batman, and they were just pulling off this long con of getting the streets less corrupt. And obviously the Riddler was going about it a very different way. Just great directing, great acting, really well done. All right, two main negative sides of this, though, for me. One, it was too long. It did not need to be as long as it was. I think that there are scenes that Batman took, 45 seconds walking into a room when it could have been 10 seconds. And if you did that 25 different times throughout the movie, suddenly it's half an hour less, and it would have been the perfect running time. That being said, I wasn't bored the entire time. I was astonished at what I was looking at. I was entertained, and overall just blown away. The second thing, the introduction to the Joker. So obviously, in Arkham, Matt Reeves teased a future villain, potentially, and he has confirmed that it is the Joker. Article for that is linked below. That being said, I really wish they hadn't done that. I love what Heath Ledger did before, and obviously it's going to be difficult to be talking about a screen Joker without comparing him to Heath Ledger. However, I'm kind of done with the Joker. Like, I think it would have been nice to see him in a third or fourth film, and potentially they still could, but we really didn't need this in here. It felt very out of place and just completely unnecessary. So thanks for watching. Hope you liked that review. Please go see The Batman. Overall, this was a movie made for someone like me. I loved every minute of it. I hope you do too. As usual, from one collector to all of you, have a good night.